Australia is an island continent with two distinct areas of populated ground. The country's western and eastern seaboards are separated by a number of deserts. There are only two sealed highways linking east and west, one in the north and one in the south, with an unsealed highway running through the middle of the country. The only other strategic link between east and west is the Trans-Australian Railway. The Trans-Australian Railway line crosses the Nullarbor Plain from Kalgoorlie to Port Augusta. This documentary explores the history and current status of the railway line and the sidings along its length. Our story starts in Kalgoorlie in Western Australia. The nearest town with a population of more than half a dozen people to the east of Kalgoorlie is Port Augusta, some 1,700 kilometres away. After gold was discovered in Coolgardie in 1892, gold was found at Kalgoorlie in 1893 and the town gazetted in 1895. Its twin city, Boulder, was founded in 1897 and the towns amalgamated in 1989. The district has a population of around 34,000. Of interest is that all but 250 people live in the two cities. This means that between Kalgoorlie, Boulder and the state border, there are only 250 people in the Shire. This makes the railway line an important strategic piece of infrastructure. Western Australia only voted to join Federation after it was agreed to build a railway line linking east and west. At this point in time, the only means of communication between east and west was a telegraph line and a sea voyage across the Great Australian Bight. Construction of the line began in 1913 when two teams set out from Kalgoorlie in Western Australia and Port Augusta in South Australia, finally meeting in the centre of the plain at Uldea in November 1917. It was to be another 24 years before the air highway was constructed in 1941. The line was entirely rebuilt in 1969 as part of a project to standardise the previously disparate rail gauges in the various states. Okay, off to the right is Kalgoorlie's famous Tuup area. Tuup next game Sunday supports community fundraising, and it's on Facebook under Kalgoorlie Tuup. Interesting stuff. Tuup has been a traditional gambling game in Australia since it spread around the country with the gold rushes in the second half of the 1800s. It is now only legal to play Tuup on Anzac Day or in a few specified venues such as casinos. However, it can still be played legally in Kalgoorlie and Broken Hill, maintaining a connection for the towns to their mining history. Tuup involves betting on which way 2 pennies will land after being thrown 10 feet in the air by a spinner inside a designated ring. Tuup was legalised in Kalgoorlie in 1983 after decades of illegal gambling and police raids. Tuup is played every Sunday at 1 p.m. at the corrugated iron ring 7 kilometres out of town on the Goldfields Highway. The organisers recently started donating funds from the game to local community groups, and in the past 18 months has given away $30,000. The Super Pit is Australia's largest open-cut gold mine. The pit is oblong in shape and is approximately 3.5 kilometres long, 1.5 kilometres wide and 570 metres deep. At these dimensions, it is large enough to be seen from space. The mine produces 850,000 ounces or 28 tonnes of gold per year and employs around 550 employees directly on site. We are leaving Kalgoorlie. The road to the left is the Mount Munga Road. It is also the road to Rawlinna. It's also the road to the Trans Access Road. It's open to all vehicles. Well, we're about to meet the railway line. Well, I'll put it this way, the railway line's coming in on our left hand side. We're approaching an old siding called Golden Ridge, and just past the siding we come to the end of the bitumen. The Mount Munga Road travels on, Karonie and Rawlinna to the left, and that's the Trans Access Road. There's a sign telling us that the Nullarbor Muster is there this coming weekend. It's 85 to Karonie. The next little sighting we're about to come up on is Stoneville. Well, there's certainly nothing other than a mark on the map that indicates that there is or was anything here. This is Stoneville. There are little tracks just sort of leading off here and there, so you'd find plenty of spaces to actually camp, I would imagine, in the bush. Not eagle, he wasn't letting go of that thing in a hurry, that bird. Along the left here there's a wall, and I'm assuming that that has been set up so the train track doesn't get flooded when all this gets flooded on this right hand side here. It's obviously a low area we're just going through. And there is the curtain little box over there. Just a pile of sleepers. That's all that's left here. The sidings, most of which are now abandoned, are placed 30 to 60 kilometres apart and feature crossing loops of at least 1800 metres to allow trains travelling in opposite directions to pass each other. And for those of you who are into hidden treasures, also the odd spare bit of railway iron. The Nullarbor Plain is the world's largest single exposure of limestone bedrock and occupies an area of about 200,000 square kilometres. It is bounded on the west by woodlands and sandhills to the east, and is 1100 kilometres at its widest point. Because there was no infrastructure along the route of the rail line, the materials used to build the line would be transported by train on the newly constructed section. There are no permanent freshwater courses along the route, and so bores and reservoirs were established at intervals, but the water was often brackish and unsuitable for steam locomotive use, let alone human consumption, so water supplies had to be carted on the train. In the days of steam locomotion, about half of the total load was water for the engine. In fact, we're now approaching Karonie. There's no rail line here, we're just crossing it. This runs up to the Karonie Dam. Karonie is about 120 kilometres east of Kalgoorlie. There is a weir which feeds into a lower reservoir which was covered with an asbestos cover to limit evaporation, which was greater than the amount of rainfall in the area. The cover is gone but the reservoir remains. Stone walls on the rocks catch rainfall and direct water into the two dams, including along a stone-lined aqueduct which directs water into the lower dam. An old timber bridge crosses the aqueduct. Karonie Dam was commenced in 1913 and completed in 1918, at the time of the building of the railway. The catchment walls on the rocks were built by interned Italian POWs from Cook during World War II. There are camping spots, plenty of good tracks, remains of the old POW camp and some mining and exploration tracks in the area. This is part of the old Flat Rocks railway line going out to Karonie Dam. As you can see, it doesn't get a lot of use any longer. We're now just within coulee of Chifley. This is certainly the Chifley repeater station, and the railway station's right behind it. Oh, the siding. Now there's an earth bank on the other side of the railway line. Now I wonder whether that is to stop the floodwaters coming over this side if it happens to rain on the other side. Let's go and have a look and see. And sure enough, we have a levee bank, basically to stop any water that flows on from the other side of the bank across the railway line. And again, Chifley has the loop line. So just a couple of kilometres down the road, it's the proper siding of Chifley. We're at the wrong end of it. A lot of spare sleepers and everything here. It even has the name up. And this is right in the middle of the loop. Actually a triple loop here. I don't know whether this left hand one keeps going for far or not. And then to the east. Behind us some old 44 gallon drums, whole heap of spare sleepers, some stone, ballast, and old timber pallets, boxes and the like. We're approaching Kanana. We're somewhere around about probably 170 kilometres from Kalgoorlie, and the road is still wet. Still very damp out here. Very obviously an Aboriginal community down that way. There's a full-on airstrip there as well. 4:22 in the afternoon, just a glorious time of the day for photography. Just beautiful. We're about 170, 180 out from Kalgoorlie, so we're leaving a dust trail. And that to me is good news. Hopefully the wet stuff is behind us. There's been a few patches. I found a nice little gravel pit, and I'm just outside Zanthus. Decided to bust out the small tent one last time. Believe me, it is one last time. That's from a campsite. That's how far away I am from the railway line. It's just there. Well, it's time to move on, and we're just a few kilometres out of Zanthus. Bit of history in this place, one way or another. So we'll go and have a look, see what it's all about. Zanthus is approximately 210 kilometres east of Kalgoorlie. A depot existed at Zanthus prior to 1915 when the east to west section of the Trans-Australian Railway was still not completed. Trains were arriving daily at the station in 1915, mostly carrying materials to the railhead from Kalgoorlie. Zanthus has an unfortunate history. Passengers were stranded at Zanthus in 1948 when a train was delayed resulting from floodwaters, causing washaways along the tracks between Zanthus and Kalgoorlie. Several passengers completed the journey to Kalgoorlie via a Goldfield Airways plane, while over 50 men worked to fix the two big washaways. A derailment of a train occurred in 1953 when 5 coaches of the Transcontinental Eastbound Express left the tracks near the town, tearing up a section of the line. Repair crews worked through the night and built a deviation by the following day. In 1975, large amounts of rain had inundated inland Western Australia from the remnants of Cyclone Trixie. A large washaway close to Zanthus had resulted in the closure of the line. A new bridge was constructed as part of the repairs in just 2 weeks. And on August the 8th, 1999, 20 people were injured when the Indian Pacific hit a stationary freight train at Zanthus. The tea and sugar train ran from 1917 until 1996. After the line was completed, there became a growing need to transport city luxuries to these isolated areas. Livestock were brought on this train as food for the settlement, and the train had its own butchering facilities. There was even a movie car that allowed townspeople to view the latest movies inside the train car when the train pulled into town. Each time the train crossed the Nullarbor Plain, it brought along different cars to suit the different needs of outback residents throughout the year. On some trains there was a bank car, which allowed residents to make financial transactions. The townships along the line existed to provide support for the continuation of rail services. When concrete sleepers replaced wooden sleepers, the maintenance became almost non-existent and forced the abandonment of these small towns and sidings. Just out of Zanthus is the road to Balladonia. probably around about 220 kilometres out of Kalgoorlie. I've got to say probably because remember we took that detour into Karonie Dam, which was in 6 or 7 kilometres. But we're still in wooded country at this point in time. Let's go across a camp, and these are the girls that are doing the walk with the horses, I believe. In March 2014, Susie Williams and Robin Lonsdale went camping with their horses, and over an amazing cooked breakfast, the idea of riding their horses from Kalgoorlie to the Nullarbor Muster at Rawlinna was born. After another cuppa, the idea developed to doing it rainless. That's with no bridle or reins. Why not have no controlling equipment on the horses' heads? Their friend Jill was invited to join them. Susie Williams, Jill Johnson and Robin Lonsdale started training the horses with a daily regime of timed walking and trotting, without utilising their reins. A byproduct was the health benefits of this type of riding, and found that it built their core body strength and confidence in their riding. The trek was planned to raise funds for Beyond Blue, the Royal Flying Doctor Service and the Melanoma Institute. The time to ride came, and Jill's horse suffered a bout of colic and was unable to take part. Jill joined Susie's husband Paul as part of the vital support team as Robin and Susie and their horses Jasper and Cuba Petey commenced their journey. The trek was a 380 kilometre walk for the horses. Saddle soreness and a fetlock problem for Cuba saw Susie also taking unplanned and untrained walk for some 50 kilometres. How's it going? How's it going? The trip's going along okay?
Yeah, he got a friction burn. He's got a friction burn, so I can't put a saddle on him, so I'm walking him out this morning.
Yeah.
Which is going to be great fun.
I reckon. Can't ride him bareback.
Yeah, I've thought about it. I'll wait and see how it goes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
seems that Kybo Petey doesn't have a lot of belief in himself. One of the things that Susie is really pleased about, as far as this walk is concerned, is it's proving to the horse that he can do it. Sometimes he lags behind, and then he'll suddenly pick up and come up. Then he'll give a big neigh. It's just really about self-belief. This walk is about the horses, it's not about the people. And this is a long walk for Susie. He's got a couple of problems. He's got a bit of saddle soreness. And he's got a bit of a problem with one hoof. But he's not being forced to do anything. He's got to do it all on his own back. She's just walking and he's just following. Again, the country changes slightly. And here's our second horse person coming up.
Told you he's a camera hog.
This bloke tends to be a bit of a camera hog, and he's also a very friendly person. So as soon as he hears a car coming or sees someone coming, he stops, turns around and wants to go and see them. Different personality altogether. Okay, so according to the sign, Kalgoorlie's 260 kilometres. We're on the Trans-Access Road, which we know, and we are right at Kitchener. The road actually crosses the railway line here. You can cross the railway line here. It's Kitchener siding. Where I'm standing is on the airstrip. That's an air sock. This is running parallel to the railway line. It's only about 100 metres away, actually. And the sign says driving of motor vehicles on this airstrip is prohibitive. Offenders will be prosecuted. Well, we didn't drive on the airfield, we drove down the side of it. The truck in front of us is Paul, Susie's husband, and he's going ahead to set up camp or start setting up camp for the horse people. Naretha was also known as the 205-mile camp. It featured rock piles and a crushing plant for the creation of railway line ballast. Naretha is the local Aboriginal name for the salt bush. The Naretha meteorite was found in 1915 about 3 kilometres north of the 205-mile station during construction of the Trans-Australia Railway. It was broken into at least 3 major pieces which were acquired by Mr John Derbyshire, the supervising engineer for the construction of the western end of the railway. Mr Derbyshire donated the meteorite to the WA School of Mines in Kalgoorlie. A second fragment was passed on to the Geological Survey of Western Australia, and there's strong presumptive evidence that the third fragment was passed on to a Mr Cook of Kalgoorlie, a private collector. Here we are on the western fringe of the Nullarbor Plain. Which way are they going to go? Yeah, no, we'll go back the other way. We've had a look, we know who it is, what it is. These little fellas, there's a couple of decent sized ones further back. This is only the second motor vehicle I think I've seen in the last, well, today anyway. They're only about 5.5k out of Rawlinna at the moment. To the left of us I can see now the mound, which is the mine, the lime mine that's over there. The mine's out there to the left. Well, they've done a little bit of work since we were here last time. Muster in that way. No one here. Well, I've set up camp on the outskirts basically. There's the muster just up there. I've a turn 180 degrees. Beyond that fence, that property is currently shearing 63,000 sheep. Apparently it's the biggest wool shed, one of the biggest wool sheds in Australia. Rawlinna was once home to about 12 families, a school, post office and a bank. Except for one weekend a year when Nullarbor Muster brings 1,000 people to the area, the town is home to a family who are caretakers of the closed lime mine and the town site. When the track sleepers were changed from wood to concrete, regular track maintenance became redundant. Upgrades meant trains would carry enough fuel to bypass many towns and crews went down to just 2 drivers. Rawlinna's livelihood, as with other towns and sidings along the route, was cut off. It was also the site of a small lime mine. The lime was extracted from the limestone that is prevalent in the area and was mostly used in the gold production process at Kalgoorlie. The mine closed in February 2012. Today there are few remnants left of Rawlinna's heyday. The school is an empty shell and most of the buildings are gone. Rawlinna is also the start of the Connie Sue Highway, an outback track that leads to Warburton. There is no fuel for sale in the town. The closest locations are Kybo and Kalgoorlie on the Air Highway, more than 100 kilometres to the south. We're heading out to have a look at the lime mine. Now closed. You can see the rail spur just alongside of us. Now I wonder whether they have intentions of starting it up again or whether it's just it's too expensive to pull it apart, so we'll just leave it. Here, just left here. Can't trust them to be there when you want them.
Well, I'm pretty impressed JT made it back out.
You'll love the thing when it gets going.
So you want this out now?
That is so awesome, JT. Did you know you're wet?
Clips, things you just put on then are over each boot.
Yep.
And that's because he tends to overstep and clip the back of his heels.
Yeah, he gets excited and he moves forward very quickly. So he'll actually bring this leg past his front legs just to get forward momentum. And
Right.
And if he stands on himself, it's called grabbing a quarter. It takes out the back of their foot, sort of like standing on the back of your heel. You know how painful that can be?
Yes.
Just imagine it with about 2 tons and a steel bit. So they've got shock absorption in the back of them built in.
It's Friday night and the Indian Pacific has pulled into town. The passengers disembark and sit down to dinner at the tables and benches set up on the town's railway station. The food is already prepared on the train and is served from trestles set up on the station platform. The train will sit for 2.5 hours before continuing its journey westwards towards Perth. After 17 highly successful gymkhanas which were held between 1964 and 1982, the Cananda Gymkhana Club went into recess and voted that a Nullarbor Community Day would replace this event. The Nullarbor Muster was born on the 19th of September 1982. The muster has been run every year since, supported by a crew of dedicated volunteers who call this outback part of Australia their home. The Nullarbor Muster was formed in 1983 to promote sporting and social activities on the Nullarbor and give support to organisations which provide service to people living in isolation.
Alrighty, we are just waiting on our judges' decisions for the best turned out horse and rider for the seniors, juniors and sub-juniors. The aim of this game is to ride down, pick up a flag, come back, put it in the barrel. The quickest person to do that and over the line wins. All the poles must be in the barrel. If you drop a pole or if the pole jumps out of the barrel, you must get off your horse, put it in the barrel and then get back on and finish. Dana turns for home, but I think Susie might have given a hip and shoulder. There's a course there by Susie. You'll have to come back, dismount and get that flag in the barrel. I think Alana Lynn might be pretty safe in second place. Neil Hogg sets them away and we're away. Competitors ride down, bend through the sticks. If the horse should knock a stick over, then that competitor is disqualified. Looks like over in lane 4 we've got a nice tidy run by Susie Williams to take out first place. But bit of competition. Robin Lonsdale on that nice little Frisian horse in lane 4, just having a few steering errors. Alana Lynn taking out first place. Go and see the guys down there, run through your stock horse trial. Has a stock of the Bisley work shirts, the Colin Flannery. Colin flying down the course on his good little bay horse called Neville. Colin's having a pretty good day on the horses so far, not so much luck in the arm wrestling. Quick turnaround and he heads for home. This could be a very slick little run, ladies and gentlemen. Colin Flannery. He's not mucking around, heads out pretty quick. First barrel goes a little wide on the near side, that mighty second barrel as he goes up towards the third. Not a bad soul around that third barrel. Gets those legs flapping. Roger Roberts, ladies and gentlemen. Assistance, our two judges have travelled all the way up from Perth this weekend, ladies and gentlemen.
Don't hold that against her. You make some noise. Blind Keller comes out, her first ever bull ride. An experience this weekend. Walter Wright, little bull looks up. Nods for his gate. Here we go. Riding with Walter Wright, ladies and gentlemen. Gets down the side a little. Tricky little bull, nods for his head. He wants out of there. Sit up and ride, Red. Sit up and ride. Make them corrections. Rode that hand high in the air. Red, Percy, ladies and gentlemen. Making a bull ride. I think we might have a qualified ride. Just came off a qualified ride in the first time, and now he's sitting up and runs into a bit of trouble in the rookie bull ride. Nick Forrester. Currently based down in Perth, started riding a few more bulls on the West Australian bull riding circuit. Recently took home third place position in the novice bull ride at Calaveran Rodeo. Out he comes for you tonight. Sit up and make some moves, Nicholas Forrester. How about this, ladies and gentlemen? He's going to give Dane Harrison a run for his money. Goes to bit of spur, Nicholas Forrester, ladies and gentlemen. Pull your rope. And off he gets. To get his leg down and get the best shot to get out. Slides up on his rope. Nick Forrester. How about some noise, ladies and gentlemen? Nick Forrester. For his gate, and out we go. Dane Harrison on a bull called Fluff. How about that? Little bull sits up. Comes back to the right. Change the direction back to the left, and that's the end of it. Here we go. Shoot number 2. Mick Austin on a bull called Flash. How about those belly rolls? That bull came out and absolutely cranked, ladies and gentlemen. Good shot of getting out. Jeremiah Day sits out, comes out across the arena. Jeremiah Day on a bull called the Peck. Jeremiah, how about this for a first qualified ride? We'll look to our judges, but I think he might have got there. Don't be fooled, ladies and gentlemen. This bull goes by the name of Big Ted. He may look furry, but he packs a punch. Wade McCarthy has to sit up. Little bull puts in a few good moves. Now he comes back around to the left. Wade McCarthy on Big Ted. Makes a nice little dismount. We all go to our judges, but I think that could be a second qualified ride. As Cameron goes to get set. Rides up on that rope. Nods for his head to stop. How about this, ladies and gentlemen? Cameron Day. Well, gorgeous George. He brought his A game. How are those first couple of jumps out of the arena, ladies and gents? Show your appreciation. This is a very good bull.
Well, it's 9 o'clock and we're dealing with peak hour traffic in Rawlinna. Driving down the main street. Just across the railway tracks there is the start of the Connie Sue Highway. This road to Hague was described to me as 110 all the way out there. Tell you what, for a dirt road, it's good. Better than some bitumen roads I've travelled on. I'm told that when they pulled the telephone line down along the railway line, the birds had nowhere to nest. So this thing is called an eyrie, and its sole purpose, I believe, is to provide nesting area for the birds. This bloke's sitting waiting for a train coming the other way to go past him. He's sitting on a spur line here. We're approaching Hague, and right alongside of us is an airstrip. Again, it's right beside the railway line. Because of the remoteness of sidings along the railway line, airstrips were constructed along the Trans-Australia Railway to fly in maintenance men to make repairs to damaged track. This is little Dave's road crossing at Hague. He was killed in a works accident here on the 24th of May 2012. Well, there was no signage that I saw to say that you can't drive along this road. I made mention that there's no sign saying you can't continue beyond. I wonder whether that was where it used to be once upon a time. There's plenty of these along the way. These are all repeater stations for Telstra. These yellow signs just on the left hand side of the road indicate where the coaxial cable is running. As can be seen from the state of the road through here, it's dry at the moment, but when it gets wet, it gets very wet. And over here are stacks of sleepers, spare, and they're all along the railway line here. So if this gets washed out, the railway line gets washed out, they've got the sleepers ready to go. Now that's the entrance to Kybo Station. There we are, currently 30 kilometres from Nurina. Well, now that we're over that station property entrance, or past that station property entrance, the road has now very definitely become a track. I'm led to believe that one of the graziers from Hague is currently charting crushed rock or something through to Forrest, and so to that end he would be picking the right and easiest road to go through, the better road to go through. So maybe the road could be reasonable, to say the least, for the next few kilometres at least. He's using a truck, of course. It is obvious that the track is used pretty regularly, whether by station owners, access people or travellers. You may recall I said that on the train we were told these were eyries and were built specially for the eagles and that sort of thing to nest in. In actual fact, they are markers. This is NMF 77. Because there are these Telstra buildings all along the way. And there's another train. They come along fairly regular. This one's got a load of cars on board. East to west they're loaded. Going back the other way they are empty generally. Not much goes back to the west, back to the east from the west. Approaching Nurina. Nurina was originally chosen because of the potential to collect water and divert it into a huge reservoir that could hold 5,883,000 gallons of water. It was also the site of a POW camp during World War II. In April 1942, approximately 300 Italian prisoners of war were put to work on the Trans-Australian Railway to expedite sleeper renewals. These men were placed at 6 locations where camps had been prepared for them. 2 gangs were established at each place, comprising approximately 50 prisoners, 18 military guards and sergeants in charge, 6 gangers and 2 cooks who were drawn from railway staff. A military camp was established at Cook for the headquarters staff. During the 20 months the prisoners of war were engaged in this line, the highest effective strength was 240. By 10th of April 1943, the total number was reduced to 182, with an effective working strength of 145. The main difficulty found with the employment of prisoners of war was that they had to be assembled in large gangs, and could therefore only be engaged on re-sleepering or similar work involving considerable labour over comparatively short mileages. Owing to the large army guard required for these prisoners, the supply camps, water, equipment, etc. were greatly in excess of that which was normal for other classes of labour. Also, the need for skilled gangers and fettlers to direct and guide the inexperienced prisoners was a severe drain on manpower needed for other work. The relations between the railway gangers and fettlers on the one hand and the prisoners and army personnel on the other were generally good. The gangers directed the work, and it was only when prisoners refused to obey orders that the military guards had cause to interfere. Well, I guess it's fair to say that that cattle race has had better days. It's interesting, having done the train trip and seeing things out the window as they flash past, to actually come out and then see exactly what is here. There we are again, another photo opportunity. Where are we right at the moment? Right there, Nurina. And there is the odd bridge or two out here as well. We're on the property of Kybo. I was supposed to ring Jill Campbell, but unfortunately we run out of range. There's no signal along the railway line, so I am taking a chance and driving into the station and hope that I'll be received cordially. I was told to bugger off gently. Well, up on the hill there, a couple of camels. There's actually 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 in all. Yeah, there's actually 6 or 7 of them altogether. Wow, there's a whole herd of them out there. Rod Campbell started as a jackaroo in the early 60s for a South Australian pastoral company who owned about 28 stations, and after about 3 years was sent to open the station in Rawlinna, which now runs about 63,000 sheep, the biggest sheep station in WA. He was the development manager right at the beginning before stocking the sheep. He had worked on 5 to 6 stations in South Australia and realised that with so much undeveloped country in WA, he could see the potential and decided to have a go. Rod and Jill Campbell took up a lease and created Kybo in the 1960s. The property is owned by the government and the leaseholder has to make certain improvements, carry so much stock and are not allowed to crop any of the grasses. Also, crops were not allowed to be planted. They had 16,000 sheep at one stage but had 4,000 sheep destroyed by dingoes and wild dogs in 2012-13. To run sheep, farmers needed to install 2-metre netting fences to keep the dogs and dingoes away from their stock. Because of the dog problem, Kybo got out of sheep and made the change to cattle. Kybo is 760,000 acres and currently stocks 1,000 cattle and is expanding. Some properties have 3,000 to 4,000 cattle. Mustering is done by vehicle. Water is systematically shut off across the property so that cattle will come in chasing the water. They have a system of trap yards so that as the cattle come in to drink, they can get in but can't get out. Average rainfall is 7 to 8 inches. 3 years ago they had 21 inches and that created more problems than it solved. They have 9 operational bores on the property, all delivering fresh water. As you go south, the water gets very salty. We're leaving Nurina and we're heading now towards Loongana. This begins the longest straight stretch of railway line in the world, I believe. And that's heading in the direction that we're heading in. This is all about 25-30 kilometre an hour stuff through here. These little Telstra places are all the way along here, but there's some rather interesting little features. There's a bird's nest, and there's one up there as well. .1 kilometres from Loongana. We're approaching Loongana. This is Loongana. Train's going through, and I'm at the remnant, all that's left of the old Loongana lime mine. Still some old rail tracks coming out here. But all that's out here now is bush. A bit of a mound there. It's 8:13 in the morning and we are leaving the Loongana site where we camped for the night, and we're heading for Forrest, which is 102 kilometres from here. Put the drone up this morning and had a look to see what was around in the old lime mining areas. It's all overgrown, there's nothing there, no mullikeeps. Nothing like Rawlinna. This has now degenerated into pretty much what I anticipated we might get across here. And of course we're caning it across here, we're doing 22, 25 kilometres an hour, the odd 30. It's a little track winding its way across the Nullarbor. When they built this train track, it comes across this area that is essentially just a big limestone shelf, and there is absolutely no permanent water supply or permanent running water anywhere across the length of the plain. The route was surveyed by Robert Anketel. When they came out here, they pushed their way through the scrub. They had their camels and they actually had a push bike. So they were using a pedometer type of thing to measure the distance, but they had a push bike that pushed along as well. It had a little recorder on it to record the accurate distance that they'd travelled in surveying the western side of the line. Hopefully tonight we will reach Deakin and we'll reach the West Australian border. And there's an obelisk there on the spot where Anketel measured the border for Western Australia. Up until about that point in time, they all thought that Eucla was in South Australia. And it wasn't until he went down and did some more measurements that they found out that Eucla was actually inside Western Australia. Which no doubt didn't please them terribly much, seeing as how there'd been a fair bit of infrastructure put into Eucla at that time. What with wharf and little township and that sort of thing. Decided to follow the truck tracks this time, and this is the access road. Right alongside the railway line. And this is the bit that you're not allowed to drive along, supposedly. But there's a guy that's carrying rock and stuff between Nurina, or Hague actually, and Forrest, and his tracks lead us onto this piece of road. This piece of road is definitely much better at this point anyway than the Telstra road is. But the thing being, of course, is that you're not supposed to be driving on this. We were advised that the truck would probably be travelling on the best piece of road that he possibly could, and to follow his wheel tracks. Well, he certainly deviated from the Telstra road just here, and I dare say further back where we made a decision to go right rather than follow the road to the left. You can see on the side of the track here at the moment, wildflowers. I have no idea what they are, but We will find out and report back. This is what we're driving alongside of. Now, are they sturt peas? I have no idea, but they are pink, they are red. They're right alongside the rail tracks. It's interesting that these flowers are all along the track, but don't appear to be anywhere else. Just along the railway track. It's almost as long as, though, as the train's gone along, someone's just dropped seed out the windows. Mundrabilla. Just letting you know that this is Mundrabilla coming up. Not to be confused with Mundrabilla Station and Mundrabilla Roadhouse down on the Air Highway. This is the siding of the Trans-Australia Railway. Well, I'm assuming that the green light that's up here is not for us, telling us to go. It's probably more to do with the trains. But the spur line happens just at this point for the safe overtaking of trains. The Trans-Australia line is, of course, a single line, and the trains to pass each other, they have to go onto a spur line and wait. We saw that earlier on. Most of these spur lines are around 1800 metres long. And there's a train up here. And that could be the... It is. Indian Pacific waiting for a train coming the other way. The sign says 2,500 metres to Forrest, in other words 2.5 kilometres. Here on the left hand side is the Forrest railway station. The dust just hangs around. And here we are at Forrest. Here we go, the sign, welcome to Forrest. Accommodation, camping, fuel, meals, showers, postal agency, it's all here. We're at Forrest Airport. Would you believe there's a plane just coming to land just as we've reached here? He's coming to land for fuel. Then he'll continue on his journey.
The hangar over there, and there used to be a big white building called the hostel.
Yeah, well,
they were the only two buildings that were here. These houses were not here before 1948.
Right. All right.
House number 4 on this side and the last one, number 6, they're identical in design. They were the first two put here by the Commonwealth in 1948 when they compulsorily acquired the property.
Oh.
Before that, it was all privately owned. It was a consortium. MMA, ANA Airlines, they were a consortium. They bought it off the original owner, Norman Brearley, West Australian Airways.
Yeah.
He set it all up. The Commonwealth put those two houses in, and in the early 50s, the pilots were landing on a daily basis and they wanted updated weather, so they sent a couple of Met Bureau chaps out here and they stayed in the hostel as well as worked in the hostel.
Oh, right. Excuse me, can you turn the...
So then they turned around and said, oh, we better build a Met Bureau, which is this building here. So they built this, and then they had to house it and staff it with 4 staff. So their staff couldn't come out here until 4 additional houses were put on site.
Yeah.
So 4 of a different design were those 3 to the left and the one in the middle. They're all the same design, and they were for the Met Bureau staff.
Right.
And all that was from 48, and then their houses were put in about 52. And that's when they built this.
Right.
And then it ran like that all the way through until the mid-90s, 94. The last Met Bureau staff left here in 95 when the private owner acquired the property after a tendering process. The Commonwealth put it up for tender, and he was the only one that put in a bid and got it.
So it's privately owned here
It's
now,
all
is it?
private now. So we're talking near on 1,000 acres. The airport and this building, all the houses, that's all part of the actual airport property. And then 4 years after acquiring this property, he then approached the railways and secured that building over the other side of the railway line. It's called the Railway Rest House. That's got 4 bedrooms, big lounge, kitchen.
Right. Oh, right. We wondered what that was as we came through.
Yeah, well, the railway chaps, they'll stay in there, but that's now privately owned, privately controlled by the owner of this place.
Right. Right.
He acquired the generators, the new bore, which is that building there, the frame and all, that's our bore. So he's got all of it.
What's the water like out here?
Pretty good, actually. A little bit of salt content, but salinity, but not as high as if you were closer to the air highway.
As you go south, I believe it gets very salty.
High, very high. We've got a desalination plant. We put about 30% of our bore water through, and that then gets fed into every one of those concrete tanks behind each of the houses, and that's all treated. So you can drink that straight away. You wash in it.
Yep.
It all gets plumbed into all the houses. Right. They got their own tank. So my job is to turn around and maintain it, look after it, manage it, look after the air side, look after the houses, the generators, the lot.
This is the old postmaster's office out here. and directly behind it was his toilet. His house used to be in by those trees over there, and he had a cement path apparently to walk on all the way across here when he went to work every day. Plenty of area to camp here. Quite a convivial little camping ground. It doesn't matter which way you go from here, the roads are rough. Okay, we're heading for Deakin, it's the border, about 82.4, another 3 to the actual border itself, so around about 85 kilometres. That's where we're heading for. We've also discovered that that red flower along the railway line is wild hops, brought in by the Afghans to pack their saddlebags with. And it just grows wild now, but mainly along the railway line, so it doesn't seem to grow anywhere else. Country chops and changes, and so does the track. A couple of seconds ago there was absolutely no bushes out there at all, it was just flat sort of grassy type stuff. Well, not really grass, but yeah, sort of like it is there now, and then all of a sudden you get the bushes and things. And it's like that for 360 degrees. It's a huge country, you just keep driving, keep driving, keep driving, and it's more of the same. This is beautiful driving weather. It's not hot outside, it's just nice and pleasant. Hardly a cloud in the sky, it's just a glorious day. You can take your pick. You can be out here and be the only vehicle, get the road yourself, or you can be sitting in 100,000 cars on the freeway. I don't know which I'd rather be doing. Interesting little arrangement just here. We're approaching Reed. There's something that's a bit interesting. In my experience, it's quite rare to have things like quarries and that sort of thing that are marked on a topo map actually exist. This one does. There's been a lot of rock come out of here. This is Reed. The airstrip over to the right of us, and there's a bore over the railway line. That's about the only places of significance for Reed. About 23 kilometres from Deakin. Tractor winds on. Okay, so it's a Telstra set up here. Yeah, so we approach Deakin, which is the last town site, last sighting before the West Australian border. And that is the Deakin obelisk. We're on the border of Western Australia and South Australia. Okay, it's 4:30 West Australian time, and we're just going to park back in a couple hundred metres from the railway line. Potentially set up camp for the night.